what we're going to do is put together the makings for what I believe in Vietnamese is called goi tron, which are roll-ups. You see them a lot at many Vietnamese places around these parts of the world. It's very popular and a lot of fun. And it uses these. Okay, this stuff is this is rice paper, called, as you can see, ban trang. And basically the trick is to wet these a little bit, and that's enough to soften them. Okay, and once you get that in place, you get all the rest of these things together. You put together a tray full of, as we'll do later, some herbs, things like basil, mint, some lettuce, various veg, and some meat. Okay, so here's the first part of it, and I'll show you exactly how this works. All right, so we get ourselves here a bowl. This is actually quite shallow, but that's good enough, just what we need. And we'll get ourselves some lukewarm water. It doesn't really matter how warm or how cool it is, as long as it's not really cold. And okay. Now, all right. Now, these things are little trays. Their only job in life is to hold is to hold these, right? And it's called kai ban trang. Okay, or I think that's what they're called. Anywho, and just as a rough guide, you can make a meal, fairly decent meal, lunch or even dinner, as we've done, out of roughly 6 of these per person. So by the time you're done, rolling things up and so forth, you've basically got yourself a fairly decent meal here. Let me show you how it's done. You pick up one of these. Okay, well, this one's ripped, so we'll use one that isn't. There we go. And they're fairly translucent. And we do this. We just immerse them in the water. Count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, whoops, 10, roughly 10 seconds, okay? Shake the water off, have this thing go on the tray, and this go under the others. You can see that there's a kind of rib on this tray that keeps one from falling directly onto the next one so they don't get stuck. So here goes the next one. Okay, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Better keep my hand on this, just so that I can pull it out in time. Okay, shake the water off, and like so. There, oops. Now what happens over a short period of time is that 1,000, 2,000, 3. Sorry, I have to count this. I'm not that good at keeping count silently. Okay, there we go. What happens is that over the couple of minutes that it takes you to do this, the rice paper softens. And you'll notice that I'm not keeping count of how many pieces of rice paper I'm using, because as you'll see in very short order, you don't have to, because it's fairly obvious. And before long, I think I'll cheat a little bit. You can see that, here we are, get to the point where, hey, there's already one here, and that's basically how we know we filled up what we need. So this is how I actually do it for one person or two people or however many. Okay, that in fact is the easy part, right? In fact, the other part's just as easy, but we'll get to that. Okay, let's get right to it. What we're going to do, of course, is make up a plateful of fixings. You'll see them as they go. This is just a cucumber, sliced up and shredded. We'll use some mint. Okay, you can use pretty much anything that's leafy. Basil, I kind of like. Here is lettuce. The actual Vietnamese goi chon also calls for noodles, but I don't think they're really necessary. They add a lot of carbs, and they're they can be done without. In my opinion, things look just as good without them. You can put a lot more on here, and when there's more than one person, obviously there'll be more stuff here. Now, this is kind of hard to get by without. Sorry. These are Vietnamese pickled vegetables, right? They're what we have here are slices of daikon radish and carrots, and there's various other things in here to give it some flavor, like lemons, and obviously these, and you can probably figure out what these are. Okay, they're called Thai bird's eye peppers. Now, we'll have a separate video that shows you exactly how to make these. These things have a characteristic pale pink, not that easy to see in this light, but a pale pink tinge, and that comes from the radishes in here being pickled. Ordinary red radishes. Okay, that belonged in there. Okay, so essentially, here's what it looks like. Okay, we have some pickled veg, some sliced up cucumbers, some meat, some leaves, in this case mint, some lettuce, and one other thing we need to do to get ready is make ourselves up some dipping sauce. I'll be back with that in a moment. All right. One thing we need to do before we actually get rolling is make ourselves up a dipping sauce. And it's fairly simple to do. I'll show you just what you need to do. We take roughly a tablespoon of seasoned rice vinegar. Okay. A teaspoon of fish sauce. Okay. Fish sauce is essentially the most popular, one of the more popular things ever being consumed in Vietnam. Apparently, average per capita consumption per year in Vietnam of fish sauce is 23 liters for every man, woman, and child. That's roughly half of one of these bottles per week for every man, woman, and child. That's how popular it is. I'll give you a look at the items here. This is fish sauce. This is absolutely the best one that I know of. Okay. Here is seasoned rice vinegar. Okay, these are worldwide brands, so hopefully they're not that hard to find. The last item here is lime juice. And here we go. What we have here is a rough guide to what we think will work. Now, the whole point of this thing, which is I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but it's very, very flavorful, and combines savoriness, in other words, some saltiness, some sweetness, some tartness. And it's something that can be quite subjective, so obviously feel free to try and get the exact flavor you want. But as a rule of thumb, what seems to work is a ratio that goes like this. 3 parts seasoned rice vinegar, 1 part fish sauce, 1 part lime juice. And if you'd like to make it a little sweeter, and I will do that, is to add a little bit of either sugar or a crystalline sweetener, for example, like this one, Truvia. Okay, now on its own, this is your perfect dipping sauce, except for people who like these, and I don't have to tell you what these are, right? Actually, they're called Thai bird's eye peppers, and lots of places that serve up, well, every place that serves up Thai food or Vietnamese food will have these in abundance. And what I'm going to do to suit my taste is lace the dipping sauce with these. There. Okay. Now, we have pretty close to what we need to get rolling. There's going to be one other thing that I will add here, and it's mostly for show. You don't have to do this. Is some tofu. It's an easy way of getting protein basically for free. Okay. I'll be right back. And now let's put it all together. A word of warning here. When you first try to do this yourself, it's probably not going to work. Your fingers will feel fumbled, and things will fall apart once or twice, but that's okay. Everybody in the world who's ever done this has had that happen. So I think if you're going to have company, the best thing you can do is try it out on yourself, using yourself as a guinea pig, until you get it right. It won't take that long, 5 or 6. Make sure you make up a few extra, wet a few extra circles of rice paper, and eventually you will get it. It won't take that long. All right. I have a couple of things here that people like to put on their creations. This one is very, very Chinese. It's called hoisin, and it has this kind of sweet and smoky flavor that many people like, including me. Hoisin, Hoisin, as very ancient Chinese. This one is well, Thai or Vietnamese, depending on who you talk to, and it's called sriracha. Okay, this happens to be a local version of sriracha that I put in a squeeze bottle for convenience. Sriracha is what you call one of the most popular hot sauces on the planet. In fact, the most popular one, made by a company called Wei Fong, is in California, and not too long ago, their factory in California was shut down by the neighbors, who complained that it smelled so bad that they weren't allowed to continue to operate there, and they had to move their factory elsewhere. But that should give you a pretty good idea of just how popular sriracha is. But we digress. So here's what we do. We've got a circle to work with, and basically we'll take some of these guys over here, something like that. Okay, we'll line stuff up about here. This is one of the secrets to getting this to work. Now we'll add some shredded cucumber, some pickled veg, and some mint leaves. That will do pretty nicely. Okay. We will give this guy a squirt or two of sriracha. I'll skip the tofu this time around and use some lettuce. Okay, now for the hard part. This is really the only hard part in the whole deal. Okay, and that is to try and get yourself a good roll. You start by lifting this up and trying to get a tight wrap. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, now what helps is that the rice paper is a little bit sticky. Now for the only hard part here, and that is to get this edge over here. That gets you, and to get this edge over here. I'm doing it slowly. With practice, it becomes easier to do this faster, and you keep on rolling, trying to get as tight a roll as you can. Okay, not bad. And into the dipping sauce, and it's good. Even if I say so myself. For emphasis, and simple enough. This one obviously lifts up and just goes underneath. And this time we'll use some tofu. We'll give this a little hoisin treatment. There. As you can see here, this is, aside from the rice paper, very, very low carb. So, there's a whole lot of pretty healthy stuff here. It's light, fresh, and one of the best things you could ever invent for summer. That's nice. And there you have it. The best part is that it doesn't actually take much cooking, except for the pickled veg. There's nothing that takes more than a few minutes. Well, making some meat is, but that doesn't take much. Any kind of meat will do, even no meat if you throw in some tofu, and you can flavor that pretty much any way you like. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's loads of fun, obviously. In restaurants, obviously, this plate is served up per individual, most commonly. In your house, of course, you don't have to. You just get either pile it high or get a bigger plate to serve up, 2, 3, or 4 people. And as a rule of thumb, as I mentioned, 5 or 6 of these will usually be pretty satisfying, especially since you control pretty much everything that's on it. Well, what are you waiting for? Okay, Now, the one part of banh hoi that you haven't found out about yet is something basically called Vietnamese pickled vegetables, and they're pretty simple to make. The solution consists of white vinegar, 2.5 cups of white vinegar, into which you dissolve. You're supposed to use sugar, but since 2 cups of sugar seemed a bit extreme to me, I use this, all right, which is a mix of something called Truvia, 0-calorie sweetener, and half that, half sugar, 3/4 of a cup of this, and 1 tablespoon of plain old coarse salt or sea salt, anything but ordinary table salt, because that has iodine in it, and iodine inhibits fermentation, so pickling won't work. Okay, so here's what we do. We're going to basically just peel the major ingredients here, which, as you can see, are a carrot. Okay. Yeah, that'll probably do. We aren't going to use all of this. Okay. And this thing here, which is called a daikon radish, and now most of the major supermarkets are carrying these. You can even find them, for example, at Loblaws. So they've become pretty common, not just Chinese places or Asian food stores. So it should be fairly easy to find. Okay, and it's basically a radish. It tastes pretty similar to any other kind of radish. Okay, these are now peeled. Okay, and the other things that go in here are some bird's eye peppers. These are Thai very hot peppers, which go in as they are. You don't cut them or anything like that. They just add a flavor accent. Some 4 red radishes. Pardon me. And we use these primarily for color. What happens during fermentation is the process itself, the fermentation process, or the pickling process, leaches color, leaches the red from the skin of the radish, and gives the whole thing a kind of very pale pink tinge that I like very much. So there are basically 4 radishes that go in here, and they're just quartered. And the other thing that goes in here are some lemon wedges. So essentially it's just roughly, this size, about half a lemon. And we'll get rid of that. And let's see here. Oops. So 1, 2. We'll basically just cut this up into 6, and these are thin enough wedges that they'll fit in between the veg as we put them in. Okay, so there we go. All right, this other half lemon we'll keep for next time. All right, now these go out. There we go. So we've basically got most of what we need. What we need, though, is for the carrot and daikon radish to be basically shredded, and that's basically what this mandolin is for. I still have no idea why it's called that, but you can see that basically you're cutting up the thing into small pieces that are mostly julienne kind of in size, a little shorter. And that looks, yeah, pretty good. Okay, okay. Here's the pickling solution. Came right off the stove, and what I'm doing is putting this thing in a bath of cold water to cool it right down a lot faster than if we just left it on the stove or left it out on the counter. Okay, right. Okay, now we're just about all there. So let's do this. In go the peppers. Okay, they can go at the bottom. It doesn't really matter where they go. Okay. We'll throw a couple of red radishes in the bottom. Okay, our object is to try and get some uniformity. And in go the rest. Okay, just like this. It doesn't really matter whether we're delicate about this or not, because eventually they'll swirl about in the pickling solution. We'll get some of the lemon wedges in. As long as they're here, it doesn't really matter whether they stand up or sit down, as long as they're somewhere in here. All right, and here go the rest. Yeah, we can also afford to fit the pickles, the veg in fairly tightly, because they will shrink a little bit once they're pickled, and there will actually be a bit more room up the top. So at times I've had to leave a little over for the next day, and once the veg have started pickling, come back the next day and add some more in. But I think this time we're pretty good. Yeah, that was pretty fair judgment. There, okay. All right, now, all we have to do now is wait for the pickling solution to cool down. We'll just test it by hand to find out when it is. We basically want it to be at room temperature, fairly cold. Okay, so these will go back in the bag, back in the fridge for the next time. And there we go. These will go off into the compost. Okay. So the only other thing we need here, and here we are these two things right here: lid and cap. So kind of nice to have those handy just when we need it. Okay, you can tell that it looks, fairly pretty here. Mix of colors, shapes, and it'll all have by the time we're done tomorrow, there'll be a pale pink tinge to the whole thing, which you should expect because these start to lose their color, and the color pigment flows out into the rest of the mix in the jar. Okay, so still warmed up. It's good. These pickles come out sweet. Okay, and it's it's part of their appeal that they taste very much unlike any other pickle I know. They're quite unique in that regard. So, okay, here we are. We've now got the pickling solution at pretty much room temperature, and all that's left for us to do is pour it into the jar. And we'll leave this fairly high so that all the veg are submerged. all we need now is lid and screw top. Okay, there we go. Good. And that's what it looks like. I think some of it is settled, so we could probably fit in a bit more. No, we're still good. All right. Now, I should point out that this thing here, this thing over here is called a wide mouth jar. Okay, and it holds the same capacity as one as a standard mouth jar, like this one, except you can see how much easier it is to get vegetables and stuff into something this big as opposed to this one. So wide mouth jar is preferable if you can get hold of it. I mean, they're not hard to do. So that's pretty much it. We'll be back tomorrow with a look at what the finished product looks like. The only drawback to Vietnamese pickled vegetables is they don't really last very long. So you've got to polish them off within about a week. Otherwise, they tend to get a bit soggy and so on. But for the first few days, they are crunchy, indescribably good in taste, and a very worthy addition to Ban Hoi. Okay, so here we are a day later, and what we have here is the finished product. And there's a very pale pink color to it. That's because of the radishes. Let me show you. Okay, so here's one of the radishes that went in yesterday, all red and white, and now basically it's just pink and pink. So if you try one of these, that's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. They're pretty nice. Very good. And as you can see, there now seems to be a little more room for extra veg to go in, although I don't have any of those right now. And this is the completed job. Very tasty. They won't last very long. These kinds of pickles only have a shelf life of a few days, so we're going to have to make sure we polish them off soon.